everybody, it's Mac, porn-free millennial. Before you get started on this podcast or the video if you're watching on YouTube, just want to say that this is very special to me. This is my first ever time interviewing somebody for this podcast. And it's my little brother, my best friend. I think you're really going to enjoy it. We enjoyed it a lot too. There were a few times that we cracked up a little bit. We had to stop, we had to take a break. We really enjoy each other's company, as you'll probably tell in the video. And there were a few times where my phone started to die because I was shooting on my iPhone. So there's a few parts that are a little cut together. I really don't think you're going to notice too much. We try to say, hey, there's a technical difficulty. That's what we kept calling them, technical difficulties, but typically it was us cracking up or the phone dying. But we were able to get the first one in the mud. This is part one. This is the why behind why we started to be each other's accountability partners in this journey. Part two is going to be how we do accountability and how you can do accountability too. I think that brotherhood in general, the term brotherhood can be applied to friendship, to brothers, to sisters. I think brotherhood is key in recovery, and it's key in holding yourself accountable and holding others accountable too. So I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. Again, thank you so much, and have a great day. Hey everybody, welcome to Porn Free Millennial. I'm Mac, the host, and we have a very special guest today. This is my little brother Noah, and today's episode is going to be focused on brotherhood and accountability, which are really just huge pieces of recovery in porn. And this is the first guest on the show, my little brother. So pretty proud of you, man. I'm really excited to have you on. I think this was a long time in the making. We've been talking about this for a while. And a beautiful Sunday in Colorado. Started to kind of hit a big blizzard yesterday. Yeah. Just in the middle of the day. That's kind of how it is out here. And the weather cleared up and the clouds parted. And here we are doing a podcast at one of my good friends' houses that I'm sitting. So kind of worked out just perfectly for us. But in today's episode, Noah's going to introduce just a little bit about himself, his relationship with porn, because it's affected us all differently in our lives. So I think it'll be important just to hear a little bit about him and his story. What part it's played in his life, what he wants to grow in this recovery journey. And I think lastly, what we're going to hit on kind of end the episode is when we really started to do this accountability process is actually a key moment in both of our lives. And like how we've continued this journey on. I would say it's been since about February of 2023 was when we started, really doing this accountability thing with each other and checking in with each other almost every day, just about every day. If you looked at a calendar, it'd probably be just about 300, probably over 300 days for sure. Probably like 340 out of 365, I would say. A few days missed. This guy was in Turkey for a little bit. So just got back. But we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I'm really excited though. This is going to start off just a chain of different episodes we're going to do where I'm going to be interviewing people that are really important in my life, people that I really look up to. And my brother, little brother, but I look up to him as well. And so Noah, without further ado, man, if you just want to let us know a little bit about you and just like your relationship with porn. And I'll just let you take it away, man.
Thanks, brother. I'm happy to be here, and I think the relationship between us has been a beautiful part of recovery, and I think recovery is not all this kind of war, this battle, this fight, and everything. It could be some of that, but it's also really getting to know yourself at a deeper level, which can be tough, but it also can be very beautiful and transformational. And I think there's very, very many like beautiful things about recovery, and that's one of those is coming out of the darkness. Some of the things that you've talked about on your podcast, and I think as brothers we've become closer than we've ever been, which is a beautiful thing because maybe without this kind of recovery thing or something, we'd be a lot less vulnerable with each other and knowing a lot less about each other, a lot less of brothers. And I think one of the things that I want to talk about today is kind of, because even though we're blood related brothers, not everybody out here is going to have a brother, and not everyone out here is going to have, maybe a brother that they kind of have the fertile ground to build this relationship on and to sow these seeds that have really flourished kind of between us. So, but I think the thing I want to say is that's possible to find that brotherhood, or maybe sisterhood or fellowship, however that might apply to any of the listeners. But it's possible to find that, even if you don't have a blood related, brother or family member,
Sure.
I think for us, it just happened that, we've been close throughout our lives and had a good relationship, but this was such an opportunity to really deepen it. And this was a mutual struggle of ours. And it was something that we would kind of connect on here and there in our lives. And there's times when, maybe I was in a state of recovery and you weren't, or vice versa, and so it's been awesome and transformational to have this. And I think going around a little bit on my background, I'm his younger brother, but
How much younger are you than me?
7 years, I think.
6 or 7
7.
years.
Yeah. So, and technically I fall in the Generation Z. So, if I ever started a podcast, I could be the
Porn-free
Zoomer.
Porn-free Zoom.
as I think we're
Ooh,
called.
I
Yeah.
like this.
So, and porn for me started at an early age, and I think back in like 7th grade was when I really started to get hooked on it. And I think the difference is that like porn in combination with masturbation is just different in a way than just masturbating. I think sometimes they can go hand in hand, and both can be addictive behaviors.
Right.
But for me, it started with the masturbating, but very, very rapidly got paired with porn. So I think it became something that was so easy and accessible for me that I think by the time where I had unfiltered kind of access to anything was like 8th grade. So I think very early on, something that became like a nightly thing. And then I think the consequences are obvious to see as I look back on it. And at the times, like I would know that something was maybe bad and I'd try to fight it. Growing up Catholic, it was something I'd give up every Lent. And then,
Right.
and then I think the most I ever got was like 32 out of the 40 days. And I felt so bad because I didn't get all the way. And
Right.
It was this like struggle of like, I feel really bad and I didn't get there. So, and then it would go back to just hiding within the use itself and hiding in the addiction. Fighting. But once I got to kind of college, I had this environmental transition where I left my home, where I was like, okay, like I'm not going to do it. And I actually was really able to stick with that. And I think I had a period of like recovery / sobriety for like 3 years, where I was exploring a lot of self-improvement and development. And I was talking about at that time, like how once I was able to quit porn, so many other things in my life, I was also able to look at and evaluate and grow in.
Yeah.
It was a foundational thing. And I really discovered a lot about myself and became a better person. And I think that's one of the things about recovery. It's not just not doing something. This goes hand in hand with like a lot of kind of other types of recovery, in different groups. Like people say, is this just what sobriety is? It's just not doing this thing, and it doesn't seem like something that's fun. But
Like a boring existence.
Right. But instead it's like you get rid of this thing that you think is like giving your life lots of value, or it's like it's the only interesting thing in your life. But the reason why it's the only interesting thing in your life is because it's giving you this huge dopamine rush and making everything else in your life pale in comparison.
I like that.
There's research on meth and how that fries your dopamine receptors so much. It's the most like huge rush of dopamine you can get. So everything else in your life basically sucks.
Yeah.
But it takes a year and they can show this on PET scans, but it takes a year for the dopamine receptors to normalize after getting off of it. But by the time it does, things in your life that bring dopamine and worthy experiences or like worthy fulfillment and joy
Yeah.
return, and it's just normal things and stuff. So I think I'm trying to remember where I was going with that, but I think
So for dopamine, just for the audience,
yeah,
how would you define it? That's like a chemical response.
it's a neurotransmitter. Yeah, it's a chemical that communicates in the synaptic gap between neurons. Yeah, and
I love that. I was like, whoa.
and hopefully I'm right, but things I've learned about. But
it's basically the feel good, right?
Yes.
Like the dopamine is like, this feels good.
yeah, and, big buzzword I think right now and stuff, but for sure, sex and porn can trigger a big amount of that.
Like you see it and you can kind of start to feel it in your body a little bit.
Yeah, and here's what I'll say kind of off the bat here. Like this is something that this is important because I think I'm in groups, I'm in recovery groups. I'm in a 12-step group, and something I hear a lot of is that this addiction, porn addiction, is harder for people than even like heroin or even meth. I've heard that from people. They've said it.
The people that are in these groups,
the 12-step pornography,
that are kind of opening up and talking about their story.
Yeah,
and they might have been addicted to other substances.
Yeah,
and they said that those substances were easier to kind of kick than the porn had.
Yeah, like cocaine, alcohol.
Did they give kind of a reason or explain kind of why?
They said that porn is much more subtle and it's much more subtle and
subtle.
of cunning. In the 12-step groups and in Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about like it's cunning and baffling and powerful. And then the 12-step group I'm in, the Porn Addicts Anonymous, it's like also same similar thing, but it speaks to us in a way in our own mind. But
and it's everywhere. Like with meth or with any kind of drug, you have to go somewhere, you have to buy it. You have to, there's some kind of probably danger involved with that for buying something illegally. I think, and I'll let you keep carrying on because I think this is a great thing, but something I was talking to someone about was how, maybe like when I was growing up a little bit, where we still had like dial-up internet, and I think you might have had a little bit of that growing up, maybe, Zoomer. But as a millennial, we remember the dial-up internet. And even like before our house, we didn't have internet for a bit when I was a kid. What did I do with myself? I don't know. But you had to kind of work to get this stuff, right? And that's kind of like older generation, right? You had to kind of work to get this stuff to where now it's everywhere. And maybe that kind of goes to your point where you're saying like why it's so hard is literally I can grab the phone that we're recording with right now and it's right there.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's holding you back except for like your willpower, which we all know the willpower thing. I've talked about that a lot. Like the willpower can come and go.
Yeah.
But really it's like your integrity, your habits, what your values are, right? But still you got that phone in your hand. You have different social media sites that are very addictive in general.
Yeah.
And then the algorithms typically will try to get you hooked on something that's very pleasing your eye, that's going to keep you there.
Yeah.
That's what the apps are really designed for. These social media sites really to keep you on as long as possible. So I guess what the long kind of point with that is kind of makes sense what you're saying about, porn being something that could be harder to quit,
right?
Because it's right there all the time, and it's embedded. It's embedded in just daily things. They're like, I'm going to check Instagram, or I'm going to go on, whatever website, Facebook,
right?
And it's just very subtly working its way in there.
Yeah. And I think it's something that feeds off of a biological function, which is interesting because alcohol, that's drinking something, but it's not something that you'd maybe find just kind of naturally occurring. That's something you need to do to survive, is to drink that substance.
Okay.
Or to use heroin or to use cocaine or those things. But like sex is something that's wired into us evolutionarily. So
to pass on
it's
the genes.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and maybe the audience, stuff talked about this with friends, or hopefully, people, who you can even talk to about porn, which I know is something that people don't even have, and that I at times didn't have too. You have to have peers, or people that open enough. But maybe it's that thing of like, evolutionarily, humans are this old, like millions of years, but for just this finite amount, this grain of sand,
Right.
we have Pandora's box, you know,
Right.
and we can go a lot into that, but I think what I'll say, and everyone knows this, and or else you wouldn't be listening, but it's really easy to get addicted to. You know, not everyone is, but it's the same. Like people have a drug of choice and addiction of choice, and in the most maybe benign, maybe that's coffee, or a common one of like workaholism, especially here in America.
Right.
But I think what I'll continue though is like I had that 3 years, everything's great, right? But it started to tank. At the start, like nearby the start of the pandemic, and
that was a big kind of moment.
Yeah, it's big for a lot of people, and I was doing okay in the beginning of the pandemic, but a big part of it happening was in graduate school and under a lot of stress, and that was a big time where that started to intensify because everything was being neglected, like all these other areas of my life, and the pandemic is going on too. So it's like a culmination of factors. And I think what the thing I'll say is like, you know, I like life gets more challenging, and you know, we just because like we have some sobriety or recovery now doesn't mean we're promised that later on, because having like good mental health, you know, and you could equate that somewhat to like a spiritual health or like, you know, other areas. But it doesn't mean the absence of problems. It means learning how to cope with them and weather the storm. So I think there was times in my life, like during that time, I was like, yeah, like I got this, but my life was more balanced and less stress, less responsibilities. But as that increases and there's a pandemic and there's all these other things, can I hold on and maintain that? You know, and if there's no vacations in recovery, some wisdom I've picked up, like you have to kind of keep on it, keep working. And, so it kind of pulled me back in right. Subtle, like people said, cunning, like it kind of came back in and was like, oh, I can help you, you know, I can help you get through this.
I've been there for you before.
Yeah.
You know, I've been there for you for a while to use as a solution.
Right. I'm here again.
I'm always here when you need me.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some good songs about that. Yeah, there's some good songs about that. It comes back, and you know, it kind of presents itself that way, and in the short term, it does fulfill its promise in a way where it like gives you that really quick relief, you know, but it doesn't it doesn't fulfill on, you know, and
basically when the act is done, you feel empty.
Yeah, and then you need to do it again and again and again. And so so it started to get back into my life, and it really started to get in the way of things, and I got reminded again in the first place why this was a problem for me and why I quit it. And the way it affected, you know, my marriage, the way it affected my relationships with other people, the way it affected my self-esteem, my confidence, my physical health, my mental health, my spiritual health, all those aspects for sure. So
like everything.
Yeah, everything.
So it kind of touches all aspects of life, because at the root, it's kind of at your like core. Like you kind of you once you accept it in, right, it becomes a part of everything, because you have to basically, right when you're done with it, you basically have to start making up a story for whoever you're with or just to yourself. Okay, how am I going to talk about this with my partner? Right? Yeah. How am I going to hide this from my partner? How am I going to just push this under the rug for myself? Those thoughts all start to come up if you have any conscience, right? If you don't have any conscience, you know, like that's probably a deeper problem that you have to dig into. But typically when the act is done and, you know, you go through the spree, I think I've used this metaphor before, where we're talking, or analogy, but like it's kind of using a credit card. Like you're done, you buy your purchase, right? And that's probably something you don't need. And then you look and you have this huge bill waiting for you. And you're like, well, I can't pay this bill right now. Yeah. And over time, it's like it just builds and builds and builds until you actually like meet it head on. You pay off your debt, right? And you pay it off and you stop using that credit card.
Yeah.
So to speak, right?
Yeah. That's a good analogy. No, that's a good analogy. And I think that is maybe a something, we put off recovery like the same way we put off paying that debt. It's like, I'll do that later. That's too hard.
Wait until the time's right.
Yeah. It's like a, procrastination thing, which I think porn can intensify. And that is always a huge bad habit of mine that I still work on, but it's like, this is too hard for me right now. And I mean, that's something I said to myself a lot. And it's like, oh, this is too hard. This is too hard right now. I need something to help right now. And that's something that porn chips away at, is your ability to tolerate distress.
Great.
Your ability to regulate your emotions, your ability to be mindful and present, and your ability to, be effective in relationships, because you're not, like, all those other things go into that, but you're also like, you're isolated, you're cut off. So yeah, I think, it weaved its way back into my life. And I think, those kind of consequences and stuff were motivators, and there's more things maybe I could get into, but my life did return to a better state. And I think that that's something you do need to look at too, because not all of it is like this individual thing of like, I have to change myself completely. Mm-hmm. It's also, there are things in your environment, there's things in your life other than porn, like, because the biggest thing, and one of the things we talk about, and I know we're talking about like porn and how it's everywhere and stuff like that. And Mac in his last episode brought up, some of the inherent problems of the porn industry and stuff. And that stuff can be good motivation to be like, okay, well, I don't want to use this, or you can view it as an enemy if that's helpful. But also it's like, this is a solution to underlying problems. Yeah. And that's the thing here, is like, if you're just going to quit this thing and stop the thing, that's not what a recovery is. And it's not just like abstinence, there's a difference. And that could be sobriety, but it's not recovery. And in the kind of Alcoholics Anonymous kind of language, or language around alcohol, it's being a wet drunk, or a wet, what is it?
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Or a dry drunk or something like that.
Okay.
I might be forgetting it, but basically it's that I think it's a dry drunk is what it is. But basically it's like, like you're sober, but you're still thinking in the addictive mind. And maybe you transfer that to something else.
That's really good.
But it's the sobriety is not recovery, and the recovery is like doing the deeper work on yourself and seeing what the inherent problems are.
So sobriety is more of a byproduct of recovery.
Yeah. I mean, and it's something that may go along hand in hand. Like, they're both, I think, conducive to each other and definitely have that relationship. But yeah, I think that's the thing here, and that. Yes, recovery is going to suck if it's just, I'm going to stop doing this, because then there's all these problems.
Yeah, everything's kind of going against you.
Yeah, for sure. But it's so much sweeter when those problems are handled. And it's like, man, like, there was so much other stuff, and this was just masking that. You know? Man. So yeah, like, it'll help you to be able to do some of the environmental changes. But I think it goes along with those. It's not just, I'll change my environment and then that'll help me to stop. Right. It's a combination of a lot of things, and we could go off on a lot on that, but I think I think for me it would be like, I gotta cut it off. And it's like white knuckling is another way to word that. I'm like, I gotta willpower and stuff like that. And that was something that I would fight forever, is like my willpower. And that was a thing too with like the growing up, like I'd be on this streak and then I'd lose it. And, something that's said in wrestling, I used to wrestle, is, the difference between wrestling and other team sports is when you win, you won, and you alone won. Yeah. When you lose, it's your fault. Like, you're the one who lost. That's like something my teammates used to say. But in porn though, I'd say that's different. Like, I'd say there's some accountability to take, and like for one's own, and there's some ownership. Like, that's a thing.
Big time.
And also though, like, if it's only you and it's only your willpower and you're failing at the willpower, then you're going to come hard on yourself. And it's going to be this cycle of like guilt and shame, and I'm not good enough and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So anything that, like, that's the last thing I want any of the listeners to take away, is that we're up here and you're here or something. We're all in it together. We're all the same. We're all like, we're not unique in that way, really. So like, we've all been there and at any really steps here or any stage, and we could go there again. And I think that's why we do this and why we do these things in our life. And a big reason of why we keep up our accountability and show no signs or indications or arrival point for when you'd be like, all right, I think I'm ready to stop this.
Yeah, that's probably when it's probably that's at least for me. Like whenever I've gotten to points in my life where I'm like, I think I'm good.
Right.
Those are the times where I fall the hardest. Is like when I'm like, I think I'm good. I think I'm all right. You know, I got this thing figured out. I'm good. Noah, it's been nice checking in with you, buddy. But I think this porn thing's done. Now like Noah's saying, which is completely accurate. I think it's just think about it's a holistic way to live your life, right? And it's a way to live your life in a way that's going to project you forward into a better way of living into like fully who you want to be in the future, who you are now, but like where do you want to be? What do you want to do when you grow up? Like what do you really want to get to? Because I think I did an episode called The Porn Prison Man. That's kind of what I feel like a little bit is like you're in this like cell, you're in this jail cell. You know, like one of my favorite movies is The Count of Monte Cristo.
Yeah.
Love that movie. But it's almost like, I was kind of thinking about this. My therapist, and I'll kind of include Noah on this, my therapist told me, he's like, you need to have like a totem or something to remember last year. 2023, like I've talked about a lot, it was a tough year for me. You know, I went through a divorce. Brought me to a very bad mental place where I was in a bad spot, really bad spot. Never been that bad ever in my life before. Had great people beside me, like my brother and my family and friends. But really it was just devastating. It was devastating to a lot of aspects of my life and the people around me. And that kind of felt like in the Monte Cristo, if you haven't seen it, he basically is betrayed and this guy goes to prison wrongfully. And, I think I take accountability for my actions, but I'd say I was kind of in the porn prison.
Yeah.
I was in this really dark cell. He gets out of there and he gets revenge. But he gets revenge, kind of learns in the story that the best way to kind of seek revenge is to be like the better man and to at the end of the day, like live your life in a way where it's not like this vengeance, but you're actually like living your life. You're moving towards something. You're moving towards a goal. You're moving towards love. You're not, and I think I used like one of my episodes, it was like, know your enemy and feeling pissed off. And that, I think it's great to have that energy. But I think it's also great as well. The best way you can ever get revenge on porn is by living a great life and living with integrity and living naturally, right? Without this stuff in our life, that's really, it makes so many things so much more complicated. Mm-hmm. One word that I think I talked in a few podcasts about was like, keep it simple. That's like my word for the year is simple. And just think about porn in our lives. Like how simple has it made our lives?
Not
very simple at all. Now, how simple has it made maybe the porn industry? They've been making a lot of money. They make a lot of money every year. But how simple is it for us? It's not.
It's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare for a lot of people. It's a conundrum, right? It makes things so complicated, and it really does. It does like kind of cut down to like our core as a human of like, am I going to live my life this way to where I'm like living in secrecy, deceit? I'm kind of like a shadow of the person that I want to be. Mm-hmm. You have like yourself, and then you have like your shadow self. Right. That's kind of in the darkness. And really, when you're doing that, you're kind of living two separate lives. Yeah. And that can kind of shred your reality a little bit to where you start to mix in the shadow self with like your real life. Like this shadow self you kind of keep in the dark. And you're like, hey, that's just for my time. I'm going to go and do it when I need to do it for me. Yeah. Right? Because that's how it kind of felt. Yeah. Hey, I'm going to go do this thing. But then eventually, right, you start to pull in your wife, your people, you get married, you bring people into this relationship. That shadow self's right. That shadow self followed me into my relationship.
Yeah, it doesn't leave you.
It doesn't leave you.
Yeah, it doesn't leave you. It's still there for sure.
So you have to find what that shadow self thrives on, and you have to really, you do have to be forceful with that and really. But like what Noah's saying, I think is. A way you can defeat the shadow self is by forcefully living good and moving towards things in life that are positive for you. Yeah. Yeah, goals.
Definitely. Yeah.
Because in those 3 years, I'm sure that you had you were acting, you were wrestling, you had a lot of things, I think, that were focuses for you, right?
That's when I discovered what I wanted to do with my life. That's when I discovered not just like, because I was asking, like, what am I on the earth to do? Like, what's my calling?
And that's when you were struggling.
Yeah. Well, that's
phases when you weren't struggling.
Yeah, that was when I was. I started asking that once I was like, maybe 6 months into recovery and sobriety, and and then onward, and that question got more and more strong. That's the time I started to do that, and I think the answers came. That's a beautiful thing, and that's when I kind of also was feeling like, okay, because I'm asking this question, who am I asking this to? And it's not to myself. It was something much deeper. And I think that's when I started to touch on some kind of higher power out there. And I think I followed those answers, and that's what grad school was, on the path of, So, and I'm a therapist. I'll say that.
Yeah.
So that all was, if I had stayed in porn, and if I had stayed in that, I wouldn't have found that. And I think it's scary, but I'm really thankful that I got out of that. And I think, motivates me to help other people, and to help other people with this, something I'd be glad to do. And I think it's something motivates me in the 12-step groups too. That's the 12th step, is to service to others. So it's important. And I think I'll amend something I said earlier, because yes, porn is a solution to underlying problems.
Yeah.
And also it will cause more problems in your life. So this is a debate in addiction fields, did mental health issues come before the substance? And the mental health side of the therapist will say, yes, like it's the mental health issues first. It's the trauma first. It's these things first. The substance came after, and that's self-medicating for these things. Right. But then the substance use people will be like, no, like those disorders were caused by substances. And actually the right answer is they're both right. Right. Like it's a combination of those things.
Yeah,
there are substances where you actually can meet criteria for personality disorders, but being 3 months, like they've researched it, and within 3 months after, the people no longer met criteria for personality disorders. 3 months after being sober and in recovery. So what I wanted to say too with like porn is like, as we were talking, I was like, yeah, it does complicate your life more. So there will be a haze that like lifts when it's gone, and you can see more clearly, and the problems will seem more solvable, because when you're using porn, the problems are going to seem so much more intense than they actually are. Sometimes, yes, they are intense, but like with porn, it's like, the common expression, like there's a monkey on your back, like how, like you're not gonna be able to solve anything like with that there. Yeah. Or something holding you down, or whatever metaphor you want to use, but you're going to be so much lighter letting that go, and able to handle whatever obstacles you have, and like able to see life more as a journey, and something, where you can discover yourself, or, your path. And, because if you have this shadow self and this other aspect, that's also making it kind of complicated to be yourself if you're having to be two different people. You're having to hide so much. So like bringing these two things together, I think it's a continual path, but to bring back, because, to what we're also like a theme here of accountability, is that helps bring the darkness into the light. And that's something Mac and I are rigorously honest with ourselves. And that's something that recovery takes, is honesty and willingness, humility, and that's something talked about on the mentors, that Mac and I have encountered, and those we've seen on the internet or other podcasts and stuff. There's too many to name, and the voices are numerous.
Which is great. Yeah,
and there was a psychotherapist who talked about, I think his name's Robert Masters, but he talked about his approach to helping guys overcome porn, and he said like to outgrow it, to help them outgrow it. Like that. Because you're saying like, what do you want to do when you grow up and stuff? Yeah, because it keeps us stuck, and if it keeps us at a lower emotional level. It keeps because our emotion regulation, distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness, those are all skills. Those are going to be low because we're using something we're dependent on this other thing for those. So we're going to get stressed out easily. We're going to lash out more easily. We're going to seek instant gratification. We're going to treat people in our lives more like objects. Maybe not even just women,
Yeah, it could just be just you and me.
Yeah. What do I get out of this? It's like transactional, like about me kind of thing, So I think, that stuff gets me fired up to talk about where it's like, man, like this is huge, to really talk about and be like, reflect back on it, be like, yeah, wow. Like those 3 years were amazing. And I'll say above any of those things, above all that, even finding like purpose in life. I mean, that's awesome and stuff and fundamental. And I think that was something that actually came before, that came before this, but this event was monumental in my life, was meeting my current partner, wife.
Heck yeah.
And that is something that I wouldn't have had, honestly.
So you wouldn't that wouldn't have worked if you weren't on this recovery journey.
For sure. If those 3 years wouldn't have happened and I'd be starting this now in my life, I'd be even more behind. Because that time I was behind, I didn't even have a girlfriend in high school. I wouldn't count the one I had freshman year. I feel like that was still like a middle school relationship, but I was awkward as hell. And I think I had other things, like there were women that wanted to date me and stuff, but I was super awkward and I was very had a big lack of confidence and insecurity.
Right.
And I remember talking to Mac on the phone one time, or in the car. Mac was driving me in the car, and I said, he said, "Why don't you be friends with that girl?" And I was like, "Mac, why would I be friends with a girl? Like, basically they're for one thing." It's like what I said. I go, if I'm not gonna like date them, I don't even know if I used the word date. Like, why would I be like, what is it? And then Mac said, to give him credit as a big brother, he said, "Listen to yourself talk." And these wake up calls are what we need as we're growing up.
And how old were you?
I think I was like 16 or 17.
So then I was out of college.
Yeah.
I think I was at home at the time.
And I got to give this dude credit for being a huge influence in my life. And without him too, this wouldn't have been possible. So even as like a big brother figure, as we talk about now, but throughout my life, and I think Mac's been vulnerable too with me, like around, things that he wishes he would have done or done differently. And he's passed that down to me. It's not a competitive relationship. I remember talking to a past therapist of mine. He's like, I feel like that's a good age difference, where he's like 7 years older than you. Maybe if he was a little closer, a little more competitive. But, we still competed against each other a little bit, but I kind of come up short a lot of the time. You had a lot of advantages. But yeah, it gets me fired up. And yeah, like the evolution of how that was I started to see women for women and as people, and I could look them in the eye. And,
what a thought.
Yeah, right. And it was so special, in that way. And I just started having women who were friends. And
right.
Like we're talking about. Because, that time when I was 16 or 17, and that's not a good thing to say about people. But
it's like an unconscious.
Yeah.
Like you're not even thinking about it. It's just, and I didn't want to interrupt, but like one thing I was thinking about while you're talking is, think about like how this content, and over the years, I mean, it's gotten more and more, I would say, like kind of race to the bottom content with porn. Like how it's just more like once you see it, it's just like, whoa, like that was pretty intense.
Yeah.
And just imagine, put yourself back like when you were in 8th grade or 7th grade.
Yeah, seriously.
That's a huge thing for like a young boy or a girl to see.
Yeah.
And if you are that age, and in some sense, like, your brain hasn't developed, there's no expectation that you're going to really be able to really understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. But when everyone's watching it and it's like this thing that, boys talk about or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Locker room
talk.
Yeah.
That's a huge, like, I was thinking about that the other day, cause I was the same thing.
Yeah.
That's a huge like thing for a kid in middle school, and like even probably younger now, because of just the ability of cell phone or smartphones everywhere and internet. That's like such an adult, it's even beyond an adult, it's traumatic even for an adult to see, I would say, some of this stuff that's just very like brutal, most of the time I would say it's very comparable to like what rape would look like in the setup, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Like gagging and all this stuff.
Well,
and you're like in 7th grade and you see this stuff, and it's like, how are you supposed to interact with just a sweet 7th grade girl that lives down the street that you have a crush on? Mm-hmm. How the heck does that dynamic work?
And not, right. How's that stuff just going to be cleanly cut off? Like a clean boundary of like, okay, well, that's in my room with these kind of fake women like that. You could tell yourself in that,
like you're some adult or something.
Yeah, the unconscious will come in and it will affect everything. And that's the subtle kind of insidious part of that. It's like it'll color your life, without you even knowing it. It's back here and like, behind the rods and cones of your eye, whatever make up your eyes. But it's behind that basically just everything in life is a color that you didn't know it was, or like a matrix.
That's a great way to say it, because I think like when you kind of step into the light again, you bring the darkness into the light. It does feel like you're saying you do see things differently.
Things are more colorful.
Yeah, it's vibrant.
Right.
The way that I think God intended it to be, like it's just a vibrant.
Yeah.
You see people smile. You're happy for people.
And you can smile genuinely and not from a fake smile.
Like you're putting on a show.
Right.
I used to say, and I think I've said it before, but it's kind of like when I used to shake people's hands and look them in the eye. Like when I'm looking at you in the eye right now, I can tell in my heart that I'm talking the truth, and I can look in your eyes straight. I'm not holding anything back. But if I was like looking at porn right now, I would not be feeling the same way. Yeah. I'd be looking at you in the eyes and being like, I'm lying to him. He doesn't know this one thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it felt like I was living my life for such a long time.
It's like an actor.
Yeah, I was like an actor. I was putting on a show. And then I think what that does is that kind of drives you in life to act out, lack of a better term, just in other situations. Like I think I've talked in the podcast before, like I never thought like I lied about anything. I always thought I was a very honest person. And I think I was in a lot of aspects, pretty upright person. But then when it came to like porn, I was such a liar. I was like the worst liar. Like it was like almost laughable, like how bad of a liar I was. Or like I was a good liar for a while until I got caught. And then I was like, it was buffoonery. It was just like, if I was like looking at myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, like you are like so full of it right now. Mm-hmm. But then on your end, it's whatever. For a guy, it's like, okay, whatever. Like I lied to your partner. It's like devastating. It's something that it hits way different to somebody like that, because they're like, you basically lied to me on this day, and this day. Like we had this great date or whatever, and you can, oh no, you were lying then too. And those are hard conversations that we've all probably had to have. Yeah. And they suck, but they're really necessary to have those things, mm-hmm. and to bring out, like you said, Noah, the darkness into light. Mm-hmm. Because if you do not do that, that shadow self is just going to grow, and have more control over your life. Mm-hmm. You're going to be its slave. You're the slave to the shadow. I think when you let that stuff grip you, it takes you away from so much, and it takes you away physically and mentally, right? Yeah. Like I know mentally with like when I've been in the shadow realm, so to speak, I mean, holy crap, man. Like I'm like distracted. I want to get out of the room. I want to get out on my own. I'm like, hey, Noah, great talking with you. I'm out. Like, can you leave? I gotta go. I got a meeting.
Right. Yeah.
And you just make crap up, and it's like, mm-hmm. and then you think about it now, like you're saying, with this new lens on, mm-hmm. or the real lens. It's not. It's a new lens, but you break through it, right?
And it's the cave. I always bring that.
Oh yeah, with Plato's cave.
Plato. Yeah.
You go outside.
I try to enunciate the T because I often say Play-Doh. Play-Doh. Yeah, but we're talking about the Greek philosopher.
Play-Doh is pretty fun too.
Yeah. But
that could be another podcast.
Yeah. I love the smell of Play-Doh. I was actually, with my wife last night. We were shopping in King Supers, and I was like, there was Play-Doh, and
all over the Play-Doh.
Yeah, because we were smelling candles and stuff, and I was like, man, like I would just get like some Play-Doh and be like, she's like, you're so weird.
Those were the good days.
But anyway,
all the Play-Doh fans.
Our mom used to make homemade Play-Doh too. That was pretty cool.
Probably tried to eat it one time.
Well, of course, but it never tastes as good as it smells, and that's something we could bring back. That's how you could. Another topic for a podcast is taste. Porn like Play-Doh does not. It does not taste as good as it smells, right?
Like a Tide Pod.
Yeah,
I haven't eaten one of those.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, we took a quick little break, but we're back. So I think what we were talking about was you were going to talk about Plato.
Yeah,
Not
yeah, not
that Plato.
not the children's
That's a different one.
kind of there's no other thing to call it other than Play-Doh. Putty, it's not
Putty,
putty.
yeah.
So, but yeah, anyway, the Plato the philosopher though, because we're talking about the lens, but it's like, the allegory of the cave, three people chained up inside of a cave, looking at the back of the cave. You think about the imagery there and looking at the back of it, and then the opening of the mouth of the cave is behind them, and the shadows are reflected on the back of the cave, and that's what they see reality is, of these shadows and these things and the noises, but people walking by, dogs, animals and stuff. But one of them is able to break free and goes out there and sees outside of the cave and actually sees what reality is. Right. And he comes back to explain to them, and I think they spit on him, or they don't want to be freed. And this is something that you may encounter is maybe friends, other people in your life who don't see a problem with porn, maybe are not going to support you. And the thing we're talking about today is accountability and finding someone who you can invest in. You can invest in their life, they invest in yours, and you have each other's best interests at heart. Right. And you can be brutally honest and confident, confiding in that person. Right. And that's definitely something I have with this guy. And it's a high level of trust, and but it speaks to how I love this guy as a person and the kind of guy that he is. People that make each other better in life. But in the cave, though, it's a similar thing. Is like that reality, and I think we're stuck in that cave in porn, and we're chained up looking at the back of it, and we think that is all reality is, and we can be in some really dark places. And one guy, one time in group said, I've been in AA, I've been in NA, and NA is Narcotics Anonymous, and and the consequences of not being sober in those groups, a lot of times were death. So he said, I've seen people in body bags, I've seen these things. And he said, I haven't necessarily seen that here with porn, but it can lead to real consequences. Like divorce? It could lead to legal charges if the kind of porn gets into illegal areas, which it can.
Yeah,
easily.
for sure.
The things can progress.
The line's been blurring, I think, over time.
It gets blurred and blurred and blurred and blurred until you don't recognize yourself. Brother Ali in his song, which was the top of my Spotify algorithm last year, I was like, whoa, wow, really?
That's
was
cool. The
bitten apple.
The
bitten apple. Yeah, to kind of
Brother Ali,
the rapper. Yeah. But he says the feeding a monster or feeding a demon or feeding a monster you no longer recognize. Ooh. Because So seeking to feed a demon you no longer recognize. But anyway, like he said, like these consequences would be real, and people could, people could die by suicide, because of these sorts of things. Right. Like the depression can push them that far. But anyway, all that aside, though, we're talking about accountability, and one of the big reasons Mac wanted me to come on, because Mac and I are the biggest recovery people in our lives, and we do check-ins daily. And this is something, that we started and kind of you can explain, because Mac was a big part of it and a motivator for me too in that time. Yeah, and I think I remember almost exactly a year ago now. Yeah, so this is kind of cool that we're doing this right now, because we really started I would say we've been on recovery, I'd say, for a few years now, the journey of recovery, but I think the actual accountability part and putting in the work started I would say mid-February-ish. So without going into incredible detail, our grandma passed away last year. Really amazing woman. We called her Saint Anne because she was a saint. Big part of our life, really close family. And I remember the day that I decided to go porn free, and the day that I started sobriety, getting clean, was the day she went into the hospital. Which was a really meaningful day for me, because I think I knew that something was going on with her, and didn't really seem like this was going to be one of those times where, it's kind of hey, say bye to grandma, she's not going to be around for too long.
And I just remember like that was a really big moment for me because it just so happened that was the day. I think that was, I don't even know if it was related initially to that. It was just the day that I was like, hey, I'm going to go sober. I think that was like I think that might have been the day when we started to do our accountability too. And grandma went into the hospital and it was a really big deal. And I just remember I had some amazing moments throughout this really tough time of where I really thought about my life. And I thought about like my grandma's life and just how beautiful it was and how many people were around her and cherished her and all the memories and all the connections and just all the beauty and the life that she brought and the connections and the value that she brought to people's lives.
Yeah.
And I thought about that and I said, well, what about me? Like, where do I want to be? You know, when I'm in that state, you know, I go to the hospital or I'm going to die. Where I want to be, I want to be surrounded by people.
Right.
I want to be surrounded by my family. I want to have a family that can surround me with love. Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I said, guys, I got divorced. My divorce finalized in March, but my separation was like in December. And that February period was the divorce still wasn't finalized yet, but you know, basically was set in stone, all that.
Yeah.
And that was like the first time I witnessed kind of like a family member pass away that was really close, where I didn't have you know, that partner with me. And I just bring that up because I think sometimes there's moments in your life that can really help be like a catalyst for you. And I've had moments in my life before, and they were more negative moments. When I was like caught and I hit rock bottom and, you know, my ex was like, hey, you know, kind of ultimatum stuff or whatever, right? And that's how a lot of people kind of get into it, and I totally get it. Like, we need to have that catalyst. But I think we can also have a catalyst where we're actually looking forward, and it's more of a positive catalyst. It is with a death of somebody, but it's also, I think like death also brings kind of like life. It changes people's lives. All of our trajectories have changed now because of that in the family, right? And I think that was a big catalyst for me to really start this journey. I mean, I started my podcast and all that stuff in May, and I was really starting to plan it out, I think, around that time when we really started to do this accountability together. But I think that was the time where it strengthened this idea for us two to say, hey, let's do this. And it's not like let's do this for our partner, or let's do this for ourselves. Let's do this for our legacy in life. Like, this is something that,
find your why.
I want more in my life. I want to look back on this life that I had and say that was a full life I experienced. Full life full of stories and joy and adventure and revelry, like, and the good stuff, man. The good stuff, right? Not the poisoned apple, or, you know, biting into that apple that's poison, but biting into that apple from that tree, and it's pure, it tastes amazing. That's what you want your life to be, is that when you're biting out of that apple, you're like, that's a damn good apple. That's I think that's what really hit me. And that's when, you know, Noah and I have just been like, we've always been really close with each other. And it's been really cool because Noah's done some amazing things, and I've watched him grow a ton. This is one thing that I kind of saw with Noah and with me. I'm like, this is something that could really, like, it's blown stuff up in my life. And he's married, and I'm like, hey, like, I don't want to see this happen for you, you know? And here I am on the other side of it. I think that's a lot of the reason why I did this podcast and stuff too, is like, I'd hope that more people can kind of surpass that or avoid it than just be on the other, you know? Cause like I'm in a better place now, right? Like I'm happy. I'm doing some things I really love. And it's good. But at the same time, I think if I would have lived my life differently in certain stages, you know, maybe I'd still have that future ahead of me where I'd still be doing the things I love, and also wouldn't have to be dealing with all the heartbreak that goes with a divorce. Because whatever, if you like your partner or not, or whatever, if going through it, nothing's gonna make it easy. It's terrible. It's like the worst thing ever. I think me really having the catalyst for me and for you, looking at our lives differently, and then me like kind of looking at the other side of a relationship that ended up failing, right? And looking at it saying, hey, if I can pass on any kind of information, I do want to pass it on to people that I love, like you, but also like family, other family, whoever's willing to listen. And then if you're listening to this podcast, you, wherever you're at in life, whatever stage you're at, you know, Hopefully this message can help you, because I
Yeah.
think today we're really talking about like why this is important to us, why it's important to have somebody. And I think that's where we can maybe end this one today, is we can talk a little bit about like why it's important to have somebody with you that's a brother, somebody, and a brother in the sense of somebody that's going to have your back, someone that's going to be there for you when you need them, and then someone that's going to be there for you kind of when you don't want to have them around.
Yeah. Right.
That's kind of what brothers do, right? Sometimes we're going to get under each other's skin a little bit, but it's all because we love each other and we want better for our...
That's all right.
We had another technical difficulty. iPhone batteries, not what they're cracked up to be.
Yeah.
So next time we'll make sure that the charger's plugged in the whole time. But anyways, I think we were talking about how brotherhood brotherhood is a very big term.
Yeah.
And what that means is that you have someone that supports you, has your back. And I've been in groups before, just being blunt. There's some people there that aren't really there for the right reasons. And you'll find that out pretty quick. And don't feel like you're obligated to have an accountability partner that's not quite there with you.
Right.
Super important.
That could be a setback,
Big time.
Be like, oh, well, it didn't work.
Yeah.
People say that, like, oh,
Or
I
like
tried it didn't work.
Or like an echo chamber, where you maybe if you're both just kind of complaining about things.
Yeah, it pulls you in, or where you're not being honest with each other and you think you're doing the accountability. Because, that's the thing. It's like people say this, in a lot of different areas, but it's like, oh, I tried that, it didn't work.
Right.
I tried the accountability thing, it didn't work.
Right.
But it's like, was it the right person, the right fit, that sort of thing? And was it a relationship where you could really be honest, brutally honest? Because we can be honest about our successes all day. We can say, oh, like I'm this, my day count or whatever. But can we be honest about, oh, I checked out this girl for a really long time, I saw out in public, or I did a bunch of searches and I watched things even, but I didn't, jerk off. So that means I'm,
it's a win,
right? Yeah, or something like that. Like, but you're not even telling them. You're like, oh yeah, like I'm, so it's, and him and I can't really lie. And when we practice brutal honesty and just honesty, and that's a skill, being honest. It's a skill, and it's something that it for sure maybe comes naturally for some people, but for us it doesn't. We got so used to putting on that facade, and especially starting this in our early years.
Yeah.
So, and brotherhood, sisterhood, fellowship, walking alongside. That's what I really like about the Porn Addicts Anonymous groups that I'm in. But it can be found in other places. And it can be found between, a brother or a companion to walk this journey alongside. And there's a way that Mac and I structure our check-ins that, as he said, he's going to go into later on. But that'll be important to tune into, because that will help kind of guide things, because it can be kind of nebulous and out,
right.
But the way we have it is like, it's helpful for that. It's definitely helpful.
Yeah, and I think too, like you want to be kind of joined with somebody that you're rooting for, that you have, you want to see them succeed, and you want to build a personal relationship with them. So this might happen, like if you join a group, eventually you're going to be kind of paired with people, or you're going to start to get to know people. And I think that's a really important thing about it too, is like in the accountability space, building like a relationship with that person is incredibly important. Like if you are just kind of clocking in, clocking out, and you have that mindset, that's what you're going to probably get out of it. But if you're in there with somebody that you care about, or maybe it's someone you don't really quite know yet, but you know that they have the same goal as you, it's such a great environment. We talked a lot about like the shadow self, the shadow realm. It's a very lonely place. It's a very dark place. It's a cold place. I would say this is the complete opposite. When you're in the accountability place, like you're still working hard. It's not easy, but you're doing it together and you're building each other up. You're not tearing each other down.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the coolest thing with Noah is like, we've really like, I would say like the past year for sure, like we've always been like close, like really good friends, all that stuff. But I would say like the last year, like we've really gotten to know each other like really well.
Yeah.
Like really well. Like, because we'll go into it like the next kind of with the how, but I mean, we send voice memos to each other every day.
Yeah. A check-in.
Every day.
Single day.
I mean, he was in Turkey for a bit, so we gave him a little bit of a reprieve there. But with that being said, every day around noon, we're sending a voice memo about, I'd say 5 to 10 minutes long. And we're doing a check-in. And I did an episode on it, it's called Fast Check-ins, but we'll go into it in more detail together and kind of how we do it and what we get out of it. I kind of want to leave you guys with this is just, find somebody in your life that you trust. And accountability, I think, is sometimes it comes with that negative connotation, like almost like, oh man, I'm being held accountable or whatnot. But ultimately it's, you're holding yourself accountable by sharing with somebody, by being vulnerable with somebody. I mean, ultimately it's a form of holding yourself accountable, but you're doing it with somebody that you love. You're doing it with someone that you trust. You're doing it with someone that's also holding themselves accountable. Yeah. And then that makes it easier where when we're humans and we're kind of like, given the old, maybe I wouldn't say every check-in I've had has been a great one where like I'm like, it's like rah at the end. There's sometimes where Noah has to give me some like tough love, or I have to give him some tough love and say, hey, that's kind of BS.
Point out some blind spots.
Like
some incongruities. Things don't match up.
Right. Like if you're saying things and then I'm listening, I'm like, does it quite line up with what you were saying yesterday? Or like, what about that one thing that you were struggling with yesterday? How's that going?
Or are you minimizing this? It's like, okay, man, like I'd actually be kind of watchful about that.
Yeah, and we've gotten to know each other's, I'd say, like triggers and things that like maybe we kind of know, like I know kind of what Noah might be struggling with, and he knows what I struggle with. So then whenever we can kind of sense that coming on, that's when we can kind of turn on the heat a little bit in a good way, a loving way, a supporting way, and say, hey man, I'm here for you. Yeah. We've even at times had times where we've had to text each other like in the moment and maybe send each other pictures that are not attractive pictures. Like we won't go into detail.
We won't go into detail, but things that will not knock you out of
the things that are the reverse of being drawn in.
Yeah,
they'll kind of draw you out. You're like, what did I just look at? That's disgusting.
Yeah. So I think to echo kind of some of that, and before we wrap up, because I'll have to get going, but because it's like that accountable. It's like, I think maybe a legal term, like held to account for, it's not about punishment. And that's something Mac and I, it's about understanding,
right.
And both have been there. And that's the kind of unique thing about this is like, you're not going to someone who doesn't understand. And I think that's the thing. Like, and I'd say there's some practical elements here. Like I would dissuade people from enlisting their partner as an accountability, like their significant other.
Big time.
And enlisting like, I don't know, like a parent or someone who maybe just a buddy but doesn't fully understand it. I would find someone else who has a similar struggle, and that might be a tough thing to do. But there's maybe some Reddit groups. There's maybe other online groups. There's maybe
I've got a great one too. We both use the I Am Sober app.
Yeah.
Great app. Yeah. I mean, absolutely, amazing app. I love that app. Lots of community in there.
Yeah.
And it's a way that you can actually track your progress. So I didn't want to interrupt, but
no, that's a great.
I would say that that's probably one of the best apps I've ever used for just sobriety in general. Is there's so many ways you can track your sobriety, check in your sobriety. You can make pledges every day. Like I'm not going to be, I'm going to be
not
sober.
like a financial pledge, but like a pledge
right.
to
integrity.
Yeah, and to be sober for that day.
I love it.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And the Porn Addicts Anonymous, I don't get anything out of like promoting that. And 12-step groups are self-sustaining, but it's free and it's a virtual. So, and there's groups and there's a website and you can kind of register, but there's a lot of different places and there's not one size fits all for everybody. So I think, Mac and I, it works. It totally works. But at the first, it takes time to get to this point. And I think Mac and I's recovery journey hasn't just been linear. It's non-linear, it's ups and downs, but for sure, the gaps between my relapses have really lengthened. And when I do relapse, it's not so much of a relapse where I just get totally immersed back in rock bottom. Right. It's more of like, I got knocked off the path, but I'm back on it because I know I'm going to have to check in with this guy. The relapse might only last like a few hours before I have to check in with him. Or it might even be shorter if he sees what I searched up. Right. Or we tell on ourselves. We say, dude, like, I got to tell, so. But I think this was great, Mac. Thanks for having me here, and I look forward to coming back. I know we got in some great conversations that maybe got cut off. That's totally fine. But I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, man.
And just to all those people out there, like, we're thinking of you, and you're not in it alone. Don't give up. Yeah, don't give up on this, and keep listening and keep finding those turning points.
Yeah, and I would just say, like, keep fighting a good fight, right? That's what we say. Keep fighting a good fight, and like Noah touched on earlier, it's not always just like fighting against something, but it's actually fighting for something. Fights for something in your life,
and with others.
You can
enlist others too.
Yeah.
Yep.
So thank you so much, Noah. I love you, buddy.
Love you too, man.
And I'm really proud of you.
Thanks.
And this is really cool to do this with you. I mean, just thinking about all the chats we've had and all the growth that we've made. And, now we're sharing our story with others. So, if you like the message, share it with others. We'd love to just grow this and enlist people that are also on this journey, because I think it's important for everybody. From whatever walks of life you are, if you're struggling with it, to put one step forward and maybe a step forward with somebody else that you love and trust. Because the only way we win this is by doing it together.
Yeah, seriously. Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, and hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, rest of your night, whenever you're watching this, and keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.